It is not so easy for one to get out of the dualistic bliss. And this is not only because he is taught either to identify himself or to fight, and not knowing, not understanding, never knowing the third point. Not only that, but also because he is a neurochemical replanting drug addiction. It is the same, because throughout life, such proteins and enzymes are formed from a state of resistance. Enmity, fear, despondency. To these proteins and enzymes, the cells of the body literally are used to and experience the state as their own. That is, on the one hand, when such enzymes are located, the cells are depleted and they spend their resources on a permanent recovery, scarification. I'll tell you more in details later. To restore their burned, in a literal sense, plot. Such enzymes are produced from thought forms, which burn cells. That is akin in the state of agony. That is, at the level of the body, the agonizing state is again an explosion of energy. And the explosion, it causes a state of very strong takeoff, as it were a rise, an illusion of takeoff. It's also like an alcoholic who has drunk since morning. On the one hand, the cells burn and die. On the other, they spill out such energy that a person experiences in the beginning an absurd satisfaction. Similar, there is a feeling of anxiety, sadness. All of these hysterical panic attacks have the same nature, protein chemical dependence. How does this happen? Even if they tell me about the integration of consciousness, it does become wisdom for me, and I perfectly understand how to rise to awareness and how to observe my state. But why do people so long and painfully disorient themselves? And why does it still happen that I'm literally looking for an excuse to experience the state of suffering? Let's take a fresh example. After the end of the session with a student of mine, when we unearthed that his problem, which was for him a source of eternal, supposedly pain, and when we all remodeled, he saw that this was all an illusion, absurd and wild, but at the same time he had nothing else to suffer. And he entered such a state of vacuum, an emotional vacuum, which began just then a physical breakdown. And he, because of the fact that he felt sad and unhappy, rushed about and could not think of what next thing to start to worry about. He hurried to the TV. There he found a program about military actions, about murders and so on. Then exhaled with relief and said, "Now that's it, I got my dose." When we work out of awareness and observe our states, we already have the courage to say that I literally have been on a feeling of anxiety. But I want to experience it because my cells, my body scream that you cannot throw us off so sharply. We've lived like that all our lives. Therefore, people do not watch TV, perfectly knowing that this is a program for constant fear in order to maintain a constant slave state. I, as a journalist, will remember the period when I was told that if I do a cultural event and talk about children, admire them, then I will never be in demand as a journalist. We need blood, we need corpses, but if you make people happy, then you will not be riveted to the TV at all, and they will start doing whatever they want, everything they like, and whatever makes them feel good. Remember that installation on television is 95% negative. As a journalist in the past, I perfectly understand how people are attached to protein dependence. And people always, for lack of reason to blame something in his external current reality, can turn to the TV to eat everything from there that will revive the habit. Now it's good, because I feel very bad. If, for some example, I have a disability setting, as usual, then no man likes me because I'm ugly, mediocre, uninteresting. and so on, then it seems that what could be easier than make myself an interesting person at first, to ultimately become interesting to me in peace and peace with me. But nevertheless, in me there is some aspect that keeps me in this state. No, it's useless. I cannot do anything. I cannot. Where does all this come from? Is this chewing snot? These are secondary benefits. They exist because the chemical reaction is sweet and useful to me, despite the fact that this reaction is exhausting me, and that I'm sick of waking up in the morning, and in general for what I live. It is not clear at the same time, even when I tell myself all this, I always savor it. Because on secondary benefits, there's always a mechanism and the subconscious that justifies why it's good. Why it's good to suffer, why it's good to deny yourself, why it's good to resist reality, why it's good to watch TV, when it is obvious that it is necessary to throw a TV away, then the vibrations in the house will be different. Why do I always do things that seem so easy to change? For example, turn off the TV and take a book filled with meditative music and so on. Everything through what I could interrogate and get fullness. But nevertheless, I continue to do this because it is a protein. The chemical dependence is so strong that I constantly return myself to the arguments about the fact that when I suffer, it gives me a feeling of fulfillment. When I believe that I am jealously unhappy, it gives me a feeling of self-pity. And who will regret me except myself? In fact, the so-called secondary benefits always work. Let's look at this architecture in detail. So, let's see how it's looped, how we always conclude with our thoughts form on a secondary benefit. Example of, example of the student. The guy did not react in any way as he should have, supposedly reacting by showing her signs of attention. The guy did not react in any way as he should have, and now I feel unnecessary, abandoned, rejected. I thought so. I knew that thought form. I knew that nobody needed me. Nobody needed me. How does the thought swing? Thought gives rise immediately to a sense of desperation, which is reflected somewhere here, in the breast area, or can in the gut. I say all the time in the heart chakra is figurative. That is, I feel nobody needed me. We observe feelings. There is a chemical reaction of despair. For example, we call this so. In fact, living through this chemical reaction, we need to impose some interpretation on it, and we need to come up with a specific word. So this is what it's called. Is this an unpleasant feeling in the body? This is called despair. When this chemical reaction is poured into the body, it triggers even more intensifying thoughts. Horrible, life will pass, nobody needed me, I'll be left alone. That is, the same thought is basically transformed into an even more grotesque and already more spreading throughout the past, the present, the future, and all the time. How will we strengthen it now? I will never be needed by anybody. How to strengthen this feeling? We need to make the project in the future for life. I will never be needed. I will never be needed by anybody. To this feeling of despair, the same thing, the very same chemistry adds a new splash. We already call such a degree of despair as such a terrible orphanhood, such an endless, gaping loneliness. In fact, this is despair, which doubles as the level of chemistry. It just doubles, and we already call it loneliness. Loneliness. This condition. We say that that is a conditionally everything. Thought forms. There are also thought forms. Because of the chemical reactions in the body, the brain has to impose its word, its alphabetical association. Then, when we see such deep despair, loneliness, we see that the thought is also amplified. Lord, how to live, why live? Thought, why live? Thought, why live? God, God, how unhappy I am. Why then live? Subtle. In the body. There are so many reactions throughout the body that extend to the forearms, the back of the head, where pinching is the strongest in people, and most of all from this. Then it comes along the hands. That is, the whole body already has such vibrations, such anxiety. SOS, SOS. Something must be done. What to do? Die? It's early to die. So what should I do? It is necessary simply to fall completely into this feeling. That is, in the deepest despair, which then expands in time and has already become a depression. So further, when I fell into a depression, I am so lonely and I do not like myself, and so I am deeply unhappy. What do I do to get out of here? I really do not want to die. So what do I need to do? Why am I at all? Am I in a long desperation? After all, I can, in fact, realize that this has all come from my thought forms. Can I actually realize this without having any special knowledge or tools? Is there some aspect in me that says that I understand that this is the tracing paper of my mind? There is. Because each of us has a higher I that was not going anywhere. And awareness, in fact, do not learn. It does not go anywhere. The question is how much the white noise of the mind obscures our awareness and who you are. You are aware and a pure field of creative and endless unifying consciousness, but nevertheless, in you there is a certain layer that covers it and creates for you such reality. Such a small reality with respect to the boundless creative field, but such attention. Why? Because I have so-called secondary benefits by which I justify everything. Why is it profitable for me to think nobody needed me? Because it gives me a feeling of abandonment. Why do I benefit from a sense of abandonment? Because I can feel sorry for myself. And why should I feel sorry for myself? Because the feeling of pity gives me a certain feeling of refinement, some depth. And when I get a sense of depth, an awareness of my depth, it gives me the compensation for the feeling of inferiority. That is, when I feel defective, I can strengthen this feeling even more. Then think even more, yes? Look, see what you have lost. I'm so unhappy. That's what's going on with me. Why? This God, this world. Why do I continue to be in the state of deep depression? Why do I lie in bed and say, nothing will help me? Because that is the only way I can reach, supposedly, to the world and say, see how I suffer and who is suffering. It is not just the person suffers, but a very delicate, deep person suffers. Reflection is the destiny of what kind of people? Not ordinary people, but subtle. And joy, fun, serenity, it's all fools, all the time, rejoice. It turns out that at my level of thought forms, chemistry, neurons, all this web, which keeps me in the benefits of constantly tumble into this state. Take, for example, splitting, which is then given the diagnosis of schizophrenia. I work fine with all these diagnoses. This is also one of the forms of grotesque. Although the love grotesque is where the grotesque ego strive for publicity, but in the end, it's grotesque. Demonstrative leads a huge number of people to death and suicides. And we know that all the consequences for these grotesque are associated with a very subtle game, with the loss of life and death. In general, life itself is already death inside life. Such a life when I'm enslaved here in this and I justify myself with the secondary benefits that is in fact it's great. So the trap is that the more I feel unhappy, I am convinced that I am very uneasy and exalted. And polarity in itself, already from a state of absolute despair, apathy, still brings a person satisfaction because it's such a way of survival. The brain always finds secondary benefits in order to justify what reason it's good that I myself am an aggressor, because the best defense is an attack. Or why is it good that I'm deeply depressed? Because I do not rebuff anyone. I am such a person who is substituting the second cheek. Although substituting the second cheek is a complete disoriented and understanding of what was said in the scriptures. That is, I can in everything, in every aspect of suffering, find a lot of benefit. Homework. Choose any circumstance from your life that you are used to treating as negative. Write a list of why you really benefit from this. Be honest. The arguments in this list will be at least 5. We will work with it in the next lesson. Another task is very important. Now, in order to interrogate hemispheres, since after such a limited primitive school training, we turned out to be such a one-sided hemispheric, it is very important to develop both hemispheres. As children, ambidextrous, which they write with 2 hands, it is very desirable for us to become ambidextrous. Practice writing with the hand that you do not use most. If you do not use your hand to write at this time, but only print, then it is very important writing with both hands as much as possible. Select each day for half an hour or an hour, but at least for half an hour, for a certain time, and write down your thoughts. It can be in the form of a diary entry. People most likely will be skidding of ideas when we use your regular hand. Therefore, if thoughts stall and right does not work, let's say if you're right-handed and practice your left hand, then just rewrite something. Most importantly, continue to write every day. Write with your priority hand for about 5 minutes and 25 minutes with another hand. Gradually go to the same time for 15 minutes with each hand. That is a very important practice. Observe what sensations are come up at the level of thought forms, at the level of the body. It will be great if you share your impressions, observation from this particular practice, and also from the subsequent other practices. See you!